G'day guys, my name is James. I am the Incurablefanatic, um, and today I'm going to be talking you through the argument that the unborn baby or the fetus is not a human being. But before I do that, I just want to give you a bit of background as to who I am and as to why I'm making these videos. Essentially, my name's James. I'm a pro-life activist from Melbourne, Australia. I come from a state that has some of the world's worst abortion laws, apart from places like China. I really care about this issue because I think that human life needs to be defended at all stages. And essentially, my background is in debating at a tertiary level and at a school level. And I've taken those sort of skills and I've tried to apply them to the pro-life world. I'm involved in politics, and I've really been for the last maybe 6 years really sort of engaged in this debate. And my area of interest really is in the arguments and teaching others how to argue more effectively. And so that's where I'm coming from, and I want to make clear too that by making these videos, I don't want to make myself out as some absolute authority or some absolute genius on pro-life arguments. There are people who have been in this game much longer than I have, and people who quite frankly know the arguments and the material much better than I do. But the reason I'm making these videos, well, I mean, originally the reason I was making these videos is I had some people emailing me essentially saying this person made this argument to me, and I wasn't entirely sure how to respond. I know intuitively that it sounds wrong, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how to respond. Do you have any ideas? And so I started making these videos, literally to send to maybe one or two people, just so they could sort of get their head around how to argue against abortion, and so I've decided to actually make these videos available to everyone, just in case others around the world might be able to learn something from them. I hope that you do learn something, and these videos are of some help when you're out there in the real world engaging in these arguments. And the way that I always do these videos, as you're about to see, is I don't just sort of pose a problem randomly and then just talk about it for 5 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a question, and then we're going to actually go out and see what does the other side say about this. We might watch a video. We may actually just look at an article briefly and see where their arguments are coming from, and then we'll discuss how you might respond to it. In this video, we are talking about is a fetus a baby? And it's a really quite an important question for us to ask, and a really important question for us to be able to answer, because whenever you're in the real world and you're having these discussions with people who don't agree with you, pro-choice people will often come and argue that the fetus is not a human being. Now, there's a whole heap of theological and philosophical concepts connected to human personhood, and they're a discussion for another video because it's a very broad subject. But what I want to talk about specifically in this video is the term human being and whether or not it can be applied to, to the unborn baby from the moment of conception. And unsurprisingly, the answer I'm going to give you is yes. But what you may not realize is that it's actually a very uncontroversial yes, because the only people who dispute this are people who are pro-choice and people who are trying to justify their position. But believe it or not, the only people who really try and further this argument are people who don't understand their own case very well, because if you come up against a pro-choicer who's experienced in science and philosophy, they'll definitely start talking about human personhood. They will not take you on whether or not it's a human being, because quite frankly, they know they'll lose. The reason for that is human being is essentially just another word for a Homo sapien. Human being has always been a term applied to anyone of our species. And it's never been that controversial, and even in the scientific community, to this day, it isn't. And I want to show you just briefly what I mean by that, by showing you just a definition of what a human being is from the Oxford Dictionary. So, if we have a look at the Oxford Dictionary here, you'll see that it defines a human being as a man, woman, or child of the species Homo sapiens. So right there, you can see that it clearly believes that, like according to the Oxford Dictionary at least, a human being is a member of the species of the Homo sapiens. And therefore, scientifically, we know right from the moment of conception, two Homo sapiens reproduce more Homo sapiens, unsurprisingly. So we know that right from the moment of conception, you do have a human being, completely uncontroversially, according to the Oxford Dictionary. And this is what you'll find across all different dictionaries, and all different scientific dictionaries, is that there's general agreement on what a human being is. And essentially, and I know it's not a particularly good thing to sort of try and argue, but it's just the reality is that it just isn't true that it isn't a human being, because a human being simply means a Homo sapien, and a Homo sapien is what you get when two other Homo sapiens conceive a child. It's just basic science. Now, you may be looking at this definition and going, well, hang on, it says, but then it goes on to say, distinguished from other animals by superior mental development, power of articulate speech, and upright stance. Now, you may be thinking, doesn't that mean that a human being needs to have those things before it is a human being? And that's actually not what the definition is actually saying, if you read it properly. It's saying that that's what distinguishes Homo sapiens from other animals, right? So, and they're right, and that Homo sapiens do develop these things, but it's not saying you need to have them to be a Homo sapien. It's saying that the species Homo sapien does develop these things, and that's what makes it a human being, is its ability to develop these characteristics. And Homo sapiens, we know a Homo sapien is a Homo sapien because it is going to develop these things. So don't think that they're limitations, because that would be a complete misreading of the definition. So let's have a look at what the responses are by the pro-choice side. And so I've got a website here from the Pro-Choice Network of Canada. This is something I just pulled up with Google. It was one of the first results. And this is, I think, probably a fairly typical pro-life response that you get here. So if we just look at it here, essentially they start off by just saying that they talk about what the pro-life side argues. And in a sense, they're right, because the pro-life argument really does come down to the status of the unborn child, of the fetus. And just before I go on, I want to make it clear too that when I use the term fetus, I generally use it broadly to mean a child at any stage of development in the womb from conception. Technically, of course, you do have to use the different terminologies like they've got listed there. So zygote, an embryo, and these sorts of things. And so I know that fetus doesn't technically apply to all stages, but that's just how I'm using it in this video, just to make things simpler and to keep things a little bit less confusing. But let's see here. So they start off by talking about how they say the issue is actually irrelevant, because women will have abortions anyway. But I'm going to deal with that in a later video. It's a different issue about whether or not that's true. And anyway, it's a different issue. But I want to really get down to here, where they say that the status of a fetus is a matter of subjective opinion, and the only opinion that counts is that of the pregnant woman. And further down, they talk about how some women will think that the child is an it, and how some women will think the child is her baby, and therefore we can't know whether or not it's a human being at all. The disturbing thing about this argument is what it boils down to, essentially, is they're saying that the status of whether it's a human being or not depends on whether or not that child is wanted. That's what they're arguing, is that how wanted a child is depends on it, changes its status, right? But we know scientifically that's ridiculous. A wanted baby shouldn't have any different moral status to an unwanted baby. If we're looking at this purely scientifically, we need to go, well, it's either a human being or it's not. What one person thinks can't change its moral status, and it shouldn't change its moral status. So, I think it's very clear here that, you know, the term you have to if someone says that to you, you just have to respond that it's ridiculous to say that the moral status of something can change because of someone's opinion, and say that's an unscientific view, and it's not a view that we should be taking into this debate. And then I just want to go down here somewhere where they talk about down here where they talk about how there's no consensus on of what a human being is, and that biology, medicine, law, philosophy, and theology all disagree. See, again, they're becoming confused here between personhood and being a human being, right? Like, you can have an argument about whether or not a baby from the moment of conception is a human person. Obviously, I think that it is, and I think there's very good reasons for thinking that it is, but I can understand that argument. To me, it's a philosophical argument which makes a lot of sense. That you can really have, and I can see the arguments on both sides. I think some of the arguments are wrong, but I can see the argument. But here, the thing is, like I said before, human being really isn't subjective, because it's a scientific term for a Homo sapien. And the reason pro-choicers are fighting this so much is because they want to avoid having to say that they're in favor of killing human beings. But the reality is, that's what they're saying. Every time they talk about abortion, they're saying they are in favor of it being legally possible to kill a human being. So I'm going to wrap the video up there because I'm running out of time. But the bottom line here is, whenever someone tells you that it's not a human being, point out to them that a human being is simply a word, is simply synonymous with Homo sapien, and that to argue anything else is simply an unscientific opinion. Point out that the terminology they're probably looking for is personhood, but that there is no dispute over whether or not the child is actually a human being. Thanks very much, guys. I am the Incurablefanatic. Please visit my website, which is below. This has all these videos and more articles and resources and links to other great places where you can learn how to argue from the pro-life perspective. Thanks to Live Action, who provide the photos at the start of this video. Make sure you check out their Flickr account and all their other work. They do great work. And I will see you guys in the next video.